Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to this special 5-part podcast series sponsored by Affiliated Monitors, which celebrates Affiliated Monitors' 15 years in business as the first entity specializing in independent integrity monitoring. Founded in 2004, Affiliated Monitors provides independent integrity monitoring and ethics and compliance assessments nationally and internationally and across almost all industries. With its knowledge of effective ethics and compliance programs and cultures, Affiliated Monitors is respected for its work as the corporate monitor on matters ranging from multinational corporations to small and mid-sized companies and even individuals. Having served in nearly 750 monitorships, no one has more experience as an independent monitor than the team at Affiliated Monitors. For more information on how an independent monitor can help improve your company's ethics and compliance programs, visit this podcast series sponsor, Affiliated Monitors, at www.affiliatedmonitors.com. In this 5-part podcast series, I'm joined by Don Stern. Don is the Managing Director of Corporate Monitoring and Consulting Services at Affiliated Monitors. Don is a well-known white-collar corporate defense lawyer. He was previously the United States Attorney for the District of Massachusetts, has been a lecturer at Harvard, and has worked at several law firms before coming over to Affiliated Monitors. In this 5-part podcast series, we consider the benefits of independent monitoring and proactive assessments for defense attorneys. In episode 1, we take a look at how defense attorneys can proactively work with independent monitors. 2, what are the nuts and bolts? How does this thing work? 3, a couple of case studies of defense counsel who've engaged a monitor to mitigate internal issues before going to a regulator. Number 4, how this works in a medical setting. And in episode 5, we conclude by how this works in the nonprofit setting, specifically looking at some issues around varsity blues. It's a fascinating series that I know you will enjoy as a compliance specialist. This special 5-part series is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back again for another episode with Don Stern, Managing Director of Affiliated Monitors for Corporate Monitoring and Consulting Services. Don, first of all, welcome back.
Thanks very much, Tom. Good to be here.
Don, in this episode, I wanted to take a look perhaps a little more into the weeds and the nuts and bolts of how this works and how to use the findings of a third-party independent. So perhaps we could start with something that I would think is basic, yet I still get a number of questions about the privilege. So could you explain how a defense attorney might engage someone like yourself and why at least the starting off with the privilege is so critical?
Well, often both the company and, of course, the privilege belongs to the company, not to the lawyer, but the company and the lawyer will like that the assessment and the review, even if done by a third party outside the company, be under attorney-client privilege. And that's really to give the company maximum information and flexibility to not have people be concerned about the information flow, being in a position to make a decision whether to report a misstep to the government or not. Not every problem needs to be reported to the government. Not every problem does the government want to hear about. So you get the ability to do that, and in some cases to protect that information, at least initially, without worrying about being sued by private parties or class actions or securities cases and whatnot. You get an unvarnished view of the facts by an outsider. It goes to the lawyer who can assess it and discuss it with his client, his or her client, and then make a decision. Do we need to report it? Should we report it? How should it be reported? So that's, the privilege has certain examples, certain advantages rather, but it's not always done that way. I mean, sometimes companies prefer that it particularly if it's in the middle of an ongoing investigation, sometimes they prefer to not go that route. So it's a decision made by a lawyer, typically an outside lawyer, with after consultation with the client.
So in the situations you've been involved with, what are some of the examples you found? So could it be as diverse as a rogue employee who is the cause of an issue, or something more systemic there where you have a breakdown of internal controls?
Well, that's really usually the first goal is to figure out is kind of the source of the problem, what triggered the problem. And I should say, Tom, that sometimes I think the misnomer is that all of these problems are sort of triggered by maybe a whistleblower or by a government subpoena or by an outside investigation. And in my experience, that's not always the case. Sometimes these days, companies have very robust internal audit programs. And so often the problem will be picked up by their own internal audit. Then the question is, okay, we've picked up the problem. We have some outliers here. We, for example, see in the FCPA context, maybe internal audit has picked up excessive expenses and payments to outside third parties in a particular country. Maybe it's a country in the Baltic region, or maybe it's a country in Africa where the office seems to have excessive payments. So the question is, what do you do with that? And often, we'll be brought in to look at the controls to make sure they're sufficient, but then also to sort of do a deep dive into that particular risk area, and then advise the company whether the controls are insufficient. Is it a rogue employee or a rogue office? Sometimes you find there's a culture in a particular office where it's not just one employee, but there may be a group of employees who have created a culture which really runs counter to what the company wants and what the company has taught in terms of compliance. But it's there nonetheless, and it presents a major enterprise risk for the company.
Don, how, I guess this is kind of a multi-part question, but how does a company take this information? But what I want to really get at is the extraordinarily difficult decision on self-disclosure. How would they work with someone like yourself as truly an independent in conjunction with defense counsel, and then, of course, the other stakeholders, board of directors involved, perhaps senior management, in the always difficult decision to self-disclose or not?
Well, in that situation, Tom, what we do is, because we're not wearing our lawyer's hat, we really just provide information to the outside lawyer, to the company, and they have to make the decision. But I've been in that role, and it's complicated, and it may depend on the industry that they're in. Obviously, in the defense industry, and the government contracting industry, or in the Medicare or Medicaid world, you're almost inevitably going to self-report. But who you report to, what you report, how it gets, if you will, packaged and presented to the regulator is all important. So what you don't want is, you don't want a reporting situation where you simply say, this is the problem. We're going to present it at your lab. Do with us whatever you want. You want to be more proactive and present the problem, the fix, and in some cases, this is where we come in some cases, the ongoing effort to monitor the situation going forward. So you provide some level of confidence to the regulator that, again, the company gets it, has fixed it, and is prepared to be fully compliant going forward.
Don, let me throw in one other factor that you touched on a little bit earlier, which is that this information could very likely get outside the company. It could be through an internal whistleblower who then goes to the Securities and Exchange Commission. It could be a competitor. It could be the Department of Justice or other regulators investigating someone within the industry and making perhaps not a routine request for documents, but one that the company is not at least initially a target. So how do you really counsel or perhaps inform the discussion, rather, about how to remediate and fix the problem? Or is the situation now, with the explosion of ways to get information out of a company, so great that a company really needs to consider that as well?
Well, it's a great question. Obviously, keeping the assessment and the review under the tent, so to speak, of attorney-client privilege helps. But, in this day and age with social media and whistleblowers and the like, it's hard to keep too many secrets, in any environment. So I think the best advice is not to put your head in the sand and to sort of think we can kind of keep this quiet and it'll stay within the company. It just doesn't work that way anymore in most cases. So, being aggressively proactive in fixing your problems, I think is the way to go. And I think being as transparent as possible within that particular company's environment, having in mind there are some litigation risk in all cases, but identifying and fixing the problems not only builds confidence internally within the company that they are working for a company that cares about compliance, but providing assurance to the outside world, shareholders, the media, government regulators that you are identifying your problems and fixing them yourself is, I think, the way to go. I mean, the old days where you can sort of put your head down and hope for the best is not very productive. And by the way, one of the ways in which companies can become proactive is when they read about other companies' problems in similar areas. If you're a bank and you read that Wells Fargo is having a problem with its false accounts and compensation structure, which seem to be at odds with good practices, I think you owe it to your shareholders and to your board to at least ask yourself the question: what about us? Is this something that we should take a look at? And I know in the following segments we're going to talk about some examples of that where companies do that.
So, Don, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I hope you'll join Don and I tomorrow where we take a look at some case studies in this area. So, Don, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Great. Thanks, Tom.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I hope you enjoyed this episode of my visit with Don Stearns on the benefits of independent monitoring and proactive assessments for defense attorneys. If you'd like more information on Affiliated Monitors, please check out their website, www.affiliatedmonitors.com. This 5-part podcast series is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network. Thank you again, and I hope you'll join us for another episode.